Okay, so if you've watched that video with the soil now, we're going to actually use the soil in the bag to root the cutting. A couple other things I'm going to need. I'm going to need some rubber bands, a paint pen or a Sharpie. I like to use a little bit of rooting powder and a little bit of water. And what I put in my water is something called Natural. Natural, G-N-A-T-R-O-L. You can get this on eBay, you can get it at a couple stores. And all it is a powder that you mix with the water. About a half a teaspoon is what I use per gallon, maybe a little bit more. And what this will do is this will help prevent fungus gnats. And fungus gnats are a pain in the butt. So they will actually eat the roots or the bark off of your cuttings. If your cuttings stay healthy and dry, they'll eat the roots and they won't bother them too much. It's not a big deal. If your cutting's struggling because you overwatered it or it's sickly, they'll eat those roots and they'll tend to kill the cutting, or at least make it not grow very strong. And then it opens you up to all sorts of other problems. So I've mixed about a half a teaspoon into this water here. And I'll just give this a couple pumps. I want it on a spray setting, like a mist setting. Okay, so now let's take a look at the cutting. This is a black Madeira cutting from UC Davis. And you can see I just put this in there last night. So it's not growing any roots yet. You can see the bottom's waxed or parafilmed, and it's got a lot of nodes. And the thing to remember, always label your cuttings. I did a pretty lousy job with my paint pen, but it is labeled. And the thing to remember is you always want to have at least one, if not two nodes below the soil level, because the nodes are where your roots are going to come out. And you always want either a tip or one node above the soil level, because that is where your shoots are going to come out. You can have some success with single node cuttings. It's much more difficult. Always try to get at least 3 nodes on your cuttings. That way you've got 2 nodes that go below the surface to get roots, and 1 node above the surface to give you shoots. Alright, so we're going to put that down for a second. Now the first thing I want to do is take my rooting powder, give it a little shake. And all I'm going to do is get this in here like this. Shake it off real well. And then all I'm going to do is blow on it. And just so that it doesn't have too much of the powder on it. You really don't want a lot of powder. You want just enough to get it going. Okay. Now another good thing that I like to do is what I did last night with this cutting is I actually soaked it in water for about 5 hours. And just lukewarm water, straight out of the tap. I just put it in and soaked it. That way if the cutting dried out at all in shipping, it rehydrates it. Okay, so I've got that going. Now I want to actually fill my bag with soil. I want to fill it up to about, if you look at the cutting, I want to leave a little bit at the top, so I want to fill it up to about here. That way I'll have this much of the cutting still sticking out. It gives me all of this cutting to root. So let me grab a cup here and get some of this soil, potting mix. Again, this is that Miracle Grow Moisture Control potting mix. I really don't believe that the type of potting mix you use matters all that much. It's really just a conduit for the roots to grow in. I like to use some organics. It's a bit of a pain sometimes with fungus gnats, but it has a little bit of fertilizer in it, so I don't have to worry about fertilizing the cutting for the first month or so of it growing. So now I'm going to take my Natural, and you can see this potting soil is really dry. I mean, very, very dry. If I squeeze it, nothing comes out. I don't even feel any moisture in it, really. I don't want it wet. I just want a little bit of moisture added to it. You can see I'm going to spray some of this, and this will get some of that Natural in there. And that'll soak down through. Preferably if you can do it maybe the night before, that's great. And then you can mix it all up in a bucket or a wheelbarrow or whatever you might have. So this will all mix in when I pour it into the bag. So I'm not too worried about having real wet spots here. but that gives me some of that natural now into my bag. And in retrospect, I should have used a smaller cup so I could just fit it in here. Let's see if I can do this now without making too much of a mess. Keyword being too much, because I'm going to make a mess. Okay. Got that soil in there, and let's check the height now. So it's pretty good. I think I want to add a little bit more to it. And again, I'm going to give it a little spray of this natural. And again, if I was using the heavier bag of soil, I wouldn't be doing this because that one had a ton of moisture in it. A little more. This one had pretty much no moisture in it. And you want to have a little moisture in your soil, but you don't want it wet. If it's wet, you're going to rot your cutting and you're going to be in bad trouble. So, okay. Got that in there. Let me add a little bit more soil. Let's see where we're at here. Okay, that's pretty good. So now you can see I've got all this excess bag. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the cutting in there and I'm going to cinch it around the cutting. And I don't want all this plastic up top. So all I'm going to do is take this and cut the bag to be smaller. Okay. Now I just get a couple rubber bands ready to make my life a little bit easier. I'll lay those right there. Take my cutting and actually I'm going to spray the top of the soil a little bit too. Just a real light mist. I'm not really wetting it. I'm just giving a little bit of that natural, a little bit of that moisture. And I'm going to take my cutting and I'm just going to twist my cutting down all the way to the bottom. You don't want it touching the plastic, but you want it pretty close. Stuck on a piece of something down there. There we go. Alright, so now it's touching the plastic. I'm going to back it out a little bit. And there we go. My cutting's in there. I'm going to cinch the top of it. Then I'm going to take my rubber band, put my rubber band around it. I'm going to go around once. And then I'm going to take the rubber band and put it all the way down to the bottom of the bag. Do that again with another one just in case this one breaks, as well as to support the bottom of the other side of the bag. Okay, and there you go. So that's in there. You can trim this top if you really want to a little bit, but I'm just going to fold it over like this. And you see now my cutting's in there. Now the roots will grow through here, and when the roots get large enough, you're going to have to up-pot it, but this will last for quite a while, and this will keep all the moisture in. You won't have to water it for a real long time, you know, probably at least the first month until it really gets growing. And these will let any extra moisture out. I mean, for where we live here in Pennsylvania, it's dry enough to where we don't have to worry about excessive moisture. If you were somewhere tropical where this continued to get wet, it might condensate and have some of the water come out. Here we don't really have to worry too much about it. And another important thing is label your bags. So this is Black Madeira. UCD. Can't hesitate enough or tell you enough times to label everything. Label your cutting, label your bags, label a container you put them in, label multiple times, because if one label falls off, you're hosed. You don't want to be guessing what things are. Alright, so now I'm going to take this other bag and I'm going to cut the top off. And I'm going to slide this in. And in a perfect world, I'd have bags that were slightly larger to make my life a bit easier. But we don't live in a perfect world. All right. Now that's in there. Again, I'm going to label this. Black Madeira, UC Davis. And we're set. Now, you're going to ask, okay, now what do I do? Because this doesn't have any green on the top of it, there's no leaves coming out, you can put it anywhere. It's going to self-contain its humidity. However, here in Pennsylvania, it's really dry. I mean, really dry out. So I always worry about the top dehydrating. So what I do is I actually have in my grow room a aquarium. You can use a Tupperware container, anything that seals. And I'll actually put this in, and then I put a film on the top, either saran wrap or a piece of plastic, clear piece of plastic. And then I'll actually puncture, let's say 3 holes every foot of surface area, every 1 by 1 foot of surface area. And what that do is it'll keep the moisture level up in there, the humidity up, but it'll also allow a bit of airflow. And then every day to 2 days, I'll go in, I'll just lift the top up, let it air out a little bit, maybe a minute, maybe 2, and then I'll put it right back down. And that's all I do. And then within a few weeks, now the Black Madeira is notoriously slow, but most varieties within 1 to 2 weeks you'll start to see roots growing. The Black Madeiras can take up to a month, if not longer, so they can take a significant amount of time. And then I'll try to make a follow-up video as we get a little bit closer to these rooting so you can see the progress of them. But that is the bag method. So now I'm going to move on to the cup method. So now we're going to move on to the cup method. And here I have a cup that is used for the Chinese store or Chinese restaurants give this to you for like wonton soup and whatever else. I've used this before. I use a bunch of them. So on the bottom, all I do is I take a screwdriver and I hold it over my gas stove to heat it up, and then I puncture the bottom with 5 holes. And this will let excess water drain out, especially after you've grown some roots and you're really watering it. If it's got a little bit of foliage on the top, this will let the water drain out of the cup. Okay. Next thing, my number 1 priority is always to label my figs. So I'm going to take a bit of Scotch tape. Since I reuse these containers, I don't want to write directly on them. And I'm going to put the Scotch tape on, just like that. And that'll give me some place to write with a paint pen or a Sharpie what variety they are. Okay? So the first part of the cup method, and I'll have to cover this in another video, is to get your cuttings to root. I've been using coco coir lately. It's not quite as forgiving as sphagnum moss in my opinion, but when the roots start growing, it's much easier to get it out without breaking the roots. Sphagnum moss, I constantly would try to get the moss off and it would get tangled in the roots and the roots would break. Now for the coco coir, you can see it pulls right out. Nice and easy. And you can see the roots that were growing on this guy here. So it's ready to be up potted. I actually usually like to cup it up before they get that long. Just like when they get the small ones like that is when I normally like to do it. I waited a little bit too long for this. So this is a minor fig. This one comes from Europe. I just received it. It was about Christmas time. And so it's been in here rooting for, well, I think I had this one in the cloner box for a while. It didn't do real well, and then I put it into here. So it's been in here for about a week, maybe 2. It was in the cloner box for a couple weeks prior to that. So, 3 weeks or so to get it to root. So let's put that aside. Now, first priority is the label. So the fig cutting itself is labeled. And now I'm going to label, let's use black, shows up better. Label the cup. So this is minor, and it comes from ponds in Europe. Okay? Minor, ponds. That's how I remember. Now, for the cups, unlike the bagging method, I don't like to use a real thick potting soil. I find it's too easy to overwater the cup because you're going to have to water it constantly, and what you'll see is the top and the outsides look dry, but the insides can be wet. So I like to make this a little bit more of an airy mix. So what I'm going to do, let me get a cupful and I'll show you here. This is a mix I made up. It's primarily cocoa coir and perlite. And what I'm going to do is get a cup full of my Miracle-Gro moisture control potting mix. So here's the Miracle-Gro. Here's the cocoa coir and perlite in my left hand, your right. And on this side I've got the Miracle-Gro potting mix. You can see how dense it is in comparison. So the cocoa coir and perlite mix that I've been using has been sitting out in the house for months now, so it's pretty dry. So it's going to allow me to give a squirt of the natural water mixture. Okay, and then all I'm going to do is mix these in equal parts. Pour about half of that in, give it another spritz of that natural. Again, you don't want it wet. You just want enough to keep it a little bit dry, but have condensation show up on the outside. When I say condensation, let's see if you can see it. It's probably a little hard to see, but you can see the water droplets building up on the outside. And that's what you want. Now, obviously it's because I just sprayed it, but once you have your cutting in there, you'll be able to see if there's condensation forming on the outside. Alright, so here's the potting mix. Bit of a clump here, so I'm going to break it up. Alright. So that's about the right amount. And now what I'm going to do is just keep transferring it back and forth like this, just to get it mixed up a little bit. Now if I had a wheelbarrow or a bucket, that would obviously be a little bit easier, but I don't, so this is what's going to have to work. Okay. So that's in there. I'm going to pour it back into the other cup just one more time, but I'm going to leave, I don't know, about an inch, maybe 2 on the bottom here. Okay? I take my cutting, I'm going to hold it right where I want it, and I'm going to try not to break the root as I pour this in gently. I've got some clumps here I want to get rid of. Okay? I'm just going to slowly pour this in. Slowly pour it in so as not to break that root down below. And then once you get it a little bit more full, you can put the rest in there nice and fast. Okay? And give it a little pat. And a little shimmy. Get some of those air pockets out of there. And that's all there is to it. Now, with my potted, or my cupped up cuttings, what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to put them in a humidity chamber. Humidity chamber can be anything from an old aquarium to a Tupperware container, anything that you can put a lid on to keep moisture in. And so I'm going to put this in either an aquarium or Tupperware container, and I usually cover it with saran wrap or a piece of clear plastic so the light can still get in, but I want to be able to have it so that I can remove it or crack it a little bit or put some holes in it so that I can let some air flow in. You don't want to completely enclose it or else you'll get mold issues. So by putting a few holes in it or leaving the hard plastic top cracked or whatever you have to do, it lets a little airflow. Your goal is to keep the humidity high but still allow some air. If you can go in there every day, open it up, air it out, maybe even every other day, put it back in or put it back on so the humidity builds back up, that's perfect. It'll keep that air movement going, keep the mold from forming, and help your cutting grow nice and strong. Now, in a perfect world, I'd have another cup that was not clear, and I'd put it on the outside of this. What that would do is it would block the light from getting to the root mass down below, and it would help the roots grow a little bit stronger, a little bit faster. It's not the end of the world. 95% of the time, I actually do not use a colored cup on the bottom. I'll actually just leave it just like this. And the way I look at it is you've got all that other rooting area inside this cup for the roots to hit. Once they hit the outside, if they grow a little bit slower, I've got 2, probably 3 months until I can really put them outside. I'm not too worried about it. Now I am noticing the soil is a little bit drier than I like. I'm going to give it a little bit of a spray, not a lot. Again, if I was using the other bag of mix, I probably wouldn't be watering it at all because it had moisture already in it. This was very dry. Alright, so now I'm going to go pot up one more that I've got in here, and then I'm going to go put them in the humidity chamber. I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, so here we are in my fig room. This is what I'm using to grow my fig cuttings out in. So you can see it's an old 40-gallon breeder aquarium, and all I have is a clear plastic paint tarp over it. And in that tarp, if you look closely, you can see I've got a whole bunch of holes. I think I just used a pen or a pencil or something like that to create these holes. So I try to have at least a few every square foot. And I actually, in the back of the aquarium, have plumbing that goes out through it to let a little bit extra air in as well. So if you were doing it without those or using a Tupperware container, I would say you're going to want to put more holes in the top than what I actually have. And as the trees get a little bit bigger, I'll actually put more holes in it to let more humidity in, or sorry, to let less humidity build up in the chamber to adjust it to what it's going to have when I pull them out of here completely and either keep them in the house for a few months, put them in the greenhouse, or I put them outside. Humidity in there is probably about 85–90%, and that's probably about where I want it. You don't want 100% humidity. That'll lead to rot and mold. And you want some airflow. The house humidity, well, you can see in here, I'm actually using a fogger and a humidifier to add humidity. And on the top here, you can see it is 81 degrees in here. I'm sorry, it's 66 degrees in here with 81% humidity. And outside in the greenhouse, it's 89 degrees with 10% humidity. So it's real dry here in Pennsylvania. But these two humidifiers actually let me keep the humidity up in this room. The small one's nice, but it needs to be refilled twice a day. And so when I'm gone on the weekends, business travel, vacation, this big one has been doing a real good job of keeping it nice and humid in here, and that water will last weeks. So that's a real nice tool. You can see I'm also using a small 10-gallon aquarium with a hard plastic lid just cracked a little bit. So let's open this up and take a look. Okay. So in here you can see I've got a whole bunch of figs using the bag method and some using the cup method. Now I will say the ones that I used the cup method on leafed out much quicker. The root structures are about the same. You can see this guy here in the bag method. This was one of the first to root out, and that's a Brogiotto Blanco. I wanted to get that fig this year to correspond with my Brogiotto Nero. Tell the difference to see if they're similar or significantly different. And you can see the amount of moisture in some of these. And I didn't add a lot of water to these bags of soil, but you can see the moisture condensating on the outside of the bag. So that's a good thing. That means that there's moisture in there for the roots to feed off of. You can see these roots are nice and white, a little bit of a yellow tinge, which makes me think there might be a little bit too much moisture in there, but it's not bad. They're certainly very healthy. So some of the figs are rooting much faster than others. That's not a big surprise. It seems to always be the case. Almost all of the Brogiotto Biancos are rooted out and growing, even though they were some of the latest additions to the bags. And then there's some that leafed out without any roots, and you can see the leaves are curling up now because there's nothing to feed them. Even with the humidity, that's still going to happen occasionally. So this cutting should come back, maybe not from that node, maybe from one of the others, but we'll have to keep an eye on it and see what happens. So one thing to show you is I did have a cutting that came in, and it had this sort of lichen moldy stuff on it, and it started to get pretty bad. And this was in a different bin originally that had a higher humidity to it, and it started to mold. So what I did is I took it and I actually sprayed it with a I don't know what it's called. It was a chemical for roses, actually, that prevents mold and fungus from growing on the rose leaves. So I actually sprayed it with that lightly along the stem, and it's actually, the mold died back, and what's left is what it came with, which is some sort of, I don't know, lichen or mold or something, but the cup does have roots, so it is growing, and I'm just gonna let it go and see what happens. You can see I've got a few leafed out. That's a Mertenica ramata right there, and that's a Bordeaux Nord ramata that's growing there. So nice and healthy. I'd like to get the lights a little bit closer down, but the chain I have them on isn't long enough to get it any closer. I might put it on a bench at some point to raise it up to get these plants growing nice and healthy before spring gets here, but we'll see. So that is my my figdom as it stands today, and we'll see what happens as these start to grow over the next month or two. In a perfect world, I'd have them ready to be up potted to 1 gallon pots around April-May time frame, so there's still plenty of time. And once these guys get going, once they get to about that stage, if you fertilize them and provide them with lots of light, they grow, they just shoot up incredibly fast, so I'm not too worried about it. We will see. I'm PA Fegs, and good luck rooting. And remember, figging ain't easy, but it sure is fun.